Hey everyone, my name is Jacob Anderson, and this is my project for the year. I'm accompanied with my wife, Amelia. She's going to be participating with us today. So, my composer that I chose for this year is Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. Something really important about him, he was born May 7th, 1840 in Votkinsk, Russia. His family was pretty well off. They were upper middle class, and his dad was a mining engineer. He was influenced by Mozart. Ever since he was a little kid, he listened to Don Giovanni, and that influenced him to start learning music. He was a Russian romantic composer. Something important about the Romantic period is that it introduced a lot of new instruments into the orchestra, including the tuba, the harp, some percussion, to give it more depth, give it more emotion, expressionism, which basically makes it so you can picture it in your mind, and you can see what's going on in a story. And so it definitely helps with a lot of storytelling today, is influenced by Tchaikovsky. A lot of his childhood is recorded because of his governess, Fanny Durbach. Eventually, after they grew up, when he was an adult, she found him and she wrote him a bunch of letters reminiscing on the good times they had together when she taught him as a boy. And so that was really important to our history books today. Some of the instruments that he played was mostly just the piano and the flute. He started learning piano when he was 4 or 5, and his parents saw his potential, and so they wanted to get him started in music. And then he wouldn't learn flute until later in his college career. His education, originally his parents wanted him to go to music school, but then they kind of realized that they wanted him to have a more stable job, because learning music was kind of a low social custom. And so they wanted to have a steady job. And so they took him to a law school, the School of Jurisprudence, from 1850 to 59. And he enjoyed it. But then after he graduated, he got a job as a clerk at the Ministry of Justice, and he really hated it. And so eventually he went back to his passion, and he went to St. Petersburg Conservatory from 62 to 65. When he graduated from there, he became a professor at the Moscow Conservatory. And he wrote some pieces while he was there, but he didn't have as much time because he was teaching a lot. And so eventually he wanted to really push his career forward. And so he stopped teaching there, and eventually he started writing a lot more pieces. And so that was really good for him. So some of the genres that he's known for, it's very varied, which is what made him really popular. So he did a lot of orchestral pieces. His main pieces that he's really well known for are his ballets, which we'll get into in a little bit, and then also he did some operas as well. So here's some of his most famous works. Probably the most noticeable are Nutcracker, The Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and then he also did Romeo and Juliet Overture. He did The Queen of Spades, which is an opera. He did The Seasons and Eugene Onegin. He collaborated during Romeo and Juliet Overture. He collaborated with Mily Balakirev, who gave some suggestions for the piece. And then The Queen of Spades, he worked on it with his brother, Modest Tchaikovsky. And so that was really good for him. He didn't really do any joint compositions. Like he worked better alone, but he still liked to get advice from people, but he still wanted to be his work. So most of his works are just him by himself. Some interesting things about The Seasons. So The Seasons is a really interesting piece because each movement of the piece correlates to a different month of the year. And so they have different emotions that go along with it, depending on the season and some of the holidays. So for example, the first month, which is January, it's a very calm song. I believe it's called The Fireplace. And it's really relaxing. And then the next month in February, it goes to a more upbeat. It's called The Carnival, kind of going into Valentine's Day, husbands looking for flowers for their wives, and kind of the upbeat of walking through a store. And so it really gives you that vivid picture in your mind as you're listening to the song. And then Eugene Onegin is one of his most famous operas, and this is where he started to bring his personal life into the music. For example, in his personal life, he received love letters from Antonina Milukova, who he eventually married. And in the story of Eugene Onegin, there's a woman that is in love with this man, and she gives him a bunch of letters. and so it kind of brings in his personal life into the story. He was married for about 2 months, and then he realized he was a homosexual, and so he ended up leaving his wife, but they still stayed legally married. And so it's not really sure why they stayed together, but they never lived together ever again. Some of the impact of the music, which we'll get into in just a little bit, but first I want to talk about his death. He died on November 6th of 1893. The cause of his death is unknown. He had really good doctors working on him, but they weren't really sure what happened. Some of the rumors were that he drank unboiled water and got cholera. Because of people knowing that he was homosexual, some people assumed that he committed suicide because of an allegation of sexual assault on a minor in school. And so we're not sure what happened, but those are some of the allegations. So the main impact that he had on music today is that a lot of ballets that come out, they use the Nutcracker, the Sleeping Beauty, and the Swan Lake. They use those as a standard for modern ballets, and so they try to live up to the quality of that. He also inspired a lot of modern film music. Here I have Jaws. The music, it's a good soundtrack, but it also makes you feel like you're there in the water as the shark's coming towards you. And so a lot of film music today tries to be more emotional and get you into the scene to make it more impactful. He's also foundational for what Christmas music sounds like today. The Nutcracker is played every year, and a lot of music sounds like the Nutcracker, and so it's really good. Some fun facts about him: he was in love with his nephew. He wanted to give all of his inheritance to him. He started composing when he was 4 years old, just like little stuff. And then he also had an extreme phobia that his head would fall off while conducting, so he would hold his hand on his chin to make sure that it didn't fall off. That's it. Thank you.